Miroslav, all of us who work with youth and youth ministry are working with young people with going through an incredible time in their lives where they too are trying to choose and figure out what is the path that they're going to take. Sometimes because they see something alluring in the youth ministry or the culture that's offered, that sometimes often just in recoil against. How does a community live out together this question of discerning the life worth living, and how might that be represented in life with children?
Yeah, a question of how one decides, and even how one's decision is guided. What flows into this making of one's own path. I think it's a really fantastically important question, and especially at that juncture where, if I'm not mistaken, though I'm not an expert, I think the basic sense is that I need to transgress the boundary. Boundaries are there so that I can peek behind and look what's on the other side, and kind of a push against the boundary and to define myself against the boundaries, I think is a very, very strong one that feeds into, I think, a larger feature of our culture. Our whole culture of modernity is a culture of transgression, right? It's not a culture which is very comfortable in thinking about boundaries. So why would you want to put the boundary here, right? Why? Why can't I go on the other side of it? That's the kind of impetus toward freedom that's definitive of the culture in which we inhabit. And I think adolescents in particular, young people in particular, are embodying that in a very sturdy kind of a way. I think it's important to know for the culture as a whole, but also for adolescents, a kind of existence that is boundaryless isn't existence. And that's sometimes what we forget. If you imagine the world without boundaries, well, okay, so you couldn't imagine a world without boundaries, because any world you can imagine would have boundaries. Because to have boundary is to exist, to have existence is to have boundary, to be a particular thing is to have boundary. Therefore, the very act of freedom kind of affirms existence of boundary even when it's rebelling against the boundaries. And I think that's helpful for us to think. Then what kinds of boundaries can be plausibly made as salutary, as life-giving boundaries? And if we can communicate in a plausible way to people those kind of message about life-giving character of boundaries, I think we do a great service, not only to our teenagers, but also to the culture as a whole.